Hello, we're here.
Okay.
It's March 28th. It's a Thursday. We're here with Elizabeth Pierite Mora, and we are here with the Tunica Biloxi, part of the Language Keeper interview series. And so this interview will be copyrighted to Elizabeth, and she is letting us use part of it on the YouTube series to be part of the YouTube page, fully public after we decide on edits.
Okay.
Especially the part where this is the second time we do this because I messed up that recording.
That's okay.
So let's launch into it again. Okay. Elizabeth, if you can start off and tell us your life story in about 5 minutes.
All right. Well, I grew up in New Orleans East. You can hear me okay. We lived there until I think it was about 2005. Yeah. Because of Katrina, we moved back here to Marksville. To step back, my family, from both sides, they're from here, from Marksville. And on my dad's side, my grandfather, he was Joseph Pierite Jr., and he was tribal chairman when our tribe received state recognition. So, we lived in New Orleans, but, we still had, very close ties to Marksville, to the tribe, to Tunica Biloxi. When my grandfather was chairman, he lived in Kenner, let's see. I don't want to I know you said 5 minutes, I don't want to get too far off track, but let's see. To get to, what we're talking about, language keepers. Well, for me, that all started with my mother, Donna Pierite, and she was encouraged by my grandfather and by my great aunt Rose Pierite White. That's her image in the background. But so my grandfather, he was chairman, and my great aunt, she was at that time tribal administrator, and so they did quite a bit to I guess progress politically or to provide for the tribal community, just through activism and contacting government leaders, in order for the tribe to get funding. I remember when he was tribal chairman, that's when we first built some of the very first houses and the first tribal center where they had meetings. And before that time, Paragon Casino Resort, it was actually Cow Palace. And when it was Cow Palace, that's when they were working on state recognition, that's where they had their meetings, at Cow Palace. So I think my parents, both my mom and my dad, they've seen all the work that my grandfather, my great aunt, that they put towards the betterment of the tribe. And going back to where my mom ended up on the path of language revitalization, we found a letter in Mary Haas's papers that my great-grandfather, that's Joseph Pierite Sr., he wrote to Mary Haas, and he said, we heard that you did a lot of work with our tribe, with our former chief, Sososha Yushikong, and we'd like to teach the children of the tribe the language, and continue teaching them cultural traditions, basically. And so they asked for copies of her work, and she sent, copies of her work to them. And I'm skipping around, going from the 60s and then kind of going back to the 90s. My great aunt, my mom, she always tells this story, how my great aunt, she came out of one room in her house and she said, here Donna, I'm gonna give this to you. It was one of the Tunica dictionaries from Mary Haas, and it was signed, by her. And I think at that point, that's when, our family started, looking for more publications, more archival materials related to our tribe. And with those, during the 90s, my mom, she helped to create language materials that the tribe would send out through General Council meeting minutes, in the very beginning. And then eventually that grew into a language page. Well, it was her own newsletter that she sent out, with puzzles, word searches, stories, or just, identifying the words, this is how you say this in Tunica. Over time, she began to work with Brenda Littinger, who had created a tribal newsletter for the tribe. And in the newsletter, she had a language page, and she sent out the same materials. Also during that time, the tribe had youth camps, summer youth camps, and they called upon my mom to teach language. So she taught, language, and she taught, various crafts at those camps. And she also taught language classes during some of our tribal council meetings during the 90s. So families would go to the meeting, but then she would call the youth, and the youth would go to another building and they would learn Tunica language. And after the meeting, we all came back together, and then the youth, they shared what they learned. So those are some of the early efforts that my mom took, that she made. So she was a teacher in New Orleans, and she taught French and Spanish. So she was very accustomed to making language materials and organizing classes. And growing up, I seen all that. Our family, we'd visit libraries and collect, copies of, articles, whatever was written on our tribe or our languages. And I seen, how she, created language learning opportunities for the tribe. I know this is only question one. It's beyond 5 minutes, but
no, this is your time. I think it's a good.
I'm kind of, just.
It's super helpful to have this out and having it in a structure that makes sense to you. This is what this is about. I'm just trying to make some notes while you're doing this.
Yeah. So I guess I grew up watching all this, and today I'm doing that as a full-time job. And at that time, in the 90s, there wasn't a language and culture revitalization program, but now there is. That came about in 2014. When the program was created in 2014, I remember, speaking with, a family from here, from Tunica, Biloxi, and I believe the grandfather had passed, but he. Before he passed, he, took it upon himself to learn Tunica, and that's using, the Haas Dictionary, Mary Haas Dictionary. So, there were sort of like, these efforts along the way by families. It just wasn't my family. Everyone was, wanting to know, well, how do we speak, our language. Or our languages, And that is a question that we get oftentimes. Why Tunica? Why are we teaching Tunica? Because, we're Tunica, Biloxi, and those are two very different tribes. Tunica being an isolate, and Biloxi, they say that's a Siouan language. But I think, gradually we're making progress. And, it's slow with Biloxi right now in comparison to what we're doing with Tunica, but, we're getting there. I think we're at the early efforts. My mom, she was making coloring books, and just using a copy machine and, cutouts of images. Even my cousin, her nephew, her sister's son, Christopher Esquide, he did the illustrations for some of those early coloring books. But that's where we're at right now with Biloxi, creating coloring books. So yeah, with that, we've worked with Louisiana Wildlife Federation, Marty Floyd, and we've done a coloring book for Tunica, Tunica animals, and right now we're in the process of completing the coloring book for Biloxi animals. And with those coloring books, majority of the animals that we chose were represented in the stories, that were documented from Mary Haas or from Dorsey Swanton, from Biloxi. So that's where my thought line of thought ends.
Thank you. It was beautiful. One thing that I think that beautifully covers like the history or like the scope or the expanse of language keeping work within the Tunica, and thank you for bringing it all the way back there and bringing it forward. That's super helpful to understand. One thing that I want to understand, we talked a lot about in that story about the moment where your mother decided to become a language keeper in that sense. How did you make that decision, or did you make that decision to intentionally do language?
I was always, at her side. So, but I think, I do this because I'd like to see our tribe progress, make steps towards, bringing that, traditional knowledge, the knowledge of language, bringing it home, so people came here, 1800s, early 1900s, and they wrote down what people knew, and so that, when those people pass and, that I don't want to say it completely went away, but it wasn't as vibrant as it was. But then, that knowledge kind of gets stored at another place. And so I think, our family, that's our intention, to like bring all those, bits of knowledge that were brought other places, bring it back, and put it all together and make, a greater picture, of what our tribal traditional knowledge, what it is, what it was. So
that's good. Were there ever moments where you thought, where you questioned whether or not you wanted to do language work or other things, or?
Let's see. I knew I wanted, when I was going to college, I knew I wanted to do something, related to cultural work. Where I went to college, there wasn't a Native Studies program. So the best thing that I could, get was anthropology or an anthropology focus. But that helped me to understand, like the story of, how people, came here, came to Marksville, for example. And it's sort of like a trail. So you learn about when they came here, and then you can follow that trail to wherever their field notes are, or recordings are, wherever there's photos, So I think that is my interest. When I was in college when our tribe partnered with Tulane, and I remember being, there at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, and it was, heavy on my mind, because I knew all these things were happening, here in Marksville. I knew, a council member had gone to Tulane, and it was Brenda Littinger. She was building a partnership with Tulane. So, I guess for our family, it was like, well, what are they doing? We've been doing this, all along, and, we see newspaper articles coming out. We say, well, that's not new. We've been doing this, So, at that point, it was very important for our family to get involved, because, we don't want to just hand over the work to, a group of academics. We want to make sure that the community's voice is involved, so. So I guess, to answer your question, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and, I understood that path, that I had been following, all along, but I wasn't sure where to go. But then there was a moment when, I spoke to one of my instructors. It was Dr. Julie Ernstein. And I said, this is happening at home in Marksville. We need to, it's important for us to get involved. I don't know. It's just a very vivid moment, in my mind. So I think it was either coming out of her class or going into her class. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And, we talked a little bit about the history of the Tunica language, your family's involvement, your personal decision or understanding that you wanted to go forward this within your own life. If we're looking at a snapshot of the language right now, at this moment, could you give our audience an understanding of what's the situation of the Tunica language and how it sits within the larger language sphere of Louisiana?
Okay. Well, what we're doing right now we're just about completing our second A&A grant. We got a grant it was in 2018. That was a 3-year grant, and then the grant was renewed for another 3 years, and so right now we're in our 3rd year of that second one. But let's see. So with those grants, what we were able to do is, take. Well, I guess I should explain. In 2010, our tribe partnered with Tulane, and at that time, they began working on a children's book. In 2011, that was published. 2012, that's when my family, we became involved on a regular basis, meeting with them, over, I think it was Google Meet at that time. That was very new for us, meeting over the computer. We couldn't see everyone, but we could hear them. So that was a learning curve in and of itself. Not only just working on Tunica, learning Tunica, learning the grammar of Tunica, I should say. But
I remember when you guys were using, I think it was like a Cisco teleworking thing too. Yeah, you guys' digital journey has been really interesting and fruitful too. I mean, you guys have really led in that sense.
With the pandemic, now it's like that's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so in 2012, that's when we started meeting with them on a regular basis. And from there, we were going through, Tunica texts from Mary Haas, the old stories from Sesostri, Yishikong. We were parsing, breaking down the language, understanding the grammar, what was happening in those texts, and we were standardizing our new orthography, the lettering system. Nowadays, we don't use all of the stress markers, but at this point, I understand now, how the stress markers are helpful with, pronunciation of the language. So going through those texts, that's when we started building lessons. So we would notice a grammar pattern, and from there, someone, at Tulane, whether it be, Dr. Judith Maxwell or a student, they would create a lesson, a simple exercise on maybe possession or, I don't know, the verb markers. So, just doing that, we built up, a good body of work. And from there, that's where the idea for, this is from my perspective, maybe someone else has another memory of, all of that happened. But from there, we were able to, head in the direction of creating the Tunica textbook. And that was 10 years, 10 years in the making. It was finally published. I think it was last May. Yeah. So went through many versions. We'd go back, to certain parts of the grammar and changes. When we first, we would find a pattern in the language and the grammar, and a lesson would be created. But then, someone would do more research, and then they would find something different. And so, that group of exercises, or this lesson, which eventually became a chapter of the textbook, it may have made changes, tweaks may have been made. So yeah, and I know this is something that people have asked, when I've gone to conferences, how do we deal with that sort of thing when, the language, we teach it one way, but then the language changes, once we found more evidence, I guess, more information, more examples, in the old material. Sometimes learners might question it. Well, I thought we would say it this way, but then I think now people in the community, especially, within our group, our staff here, and, the Tunica Language Working Group, Kylie, as we call ourselves, we are of the understanding that things will change, when we have more information. So, I think nowadays, people are more flexible, with that. To get back to your original question, let's see. What was your original question?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about the snapshot of where the language is today, and I thought it was interesting how you approached that question. Made me think about how language as more of an organism, and so I think it made me realize that another question I could ask is, how is language currently embodied within the community of the Tunica?
Embodied meaning?
How is it? What function does it have in the community, the Tunica community life? Is it used within interactions, or how many people are interacting with it or embodying it, as in learning it and speaking it and hearing it or being part of it?
It's taken it's taken a while for us, to grow into the program that we have, today. I think I remember what I was originally talking about. I was talking about the grants.
Okay.
But let's see. So in the beginning, it took us years. So I said the program started in 2014, and we finally got a grant to support, the work in 2018. So it took that long for us to, get funding. I guess for people to believe in us, for people to see, what we were trying to do. But let's see. Well, we started with, just classes, and we were, using the materials from, the versions of the textbook that were being created. So all along it's been, let's see, what do I want to say? I guess in the beginning, it's sort of just trial and error. And nowadays, nowadays we're having workshops for employees. We're having weekly classes. When we send students to Washington, D.C. for close-up USET, we make sure that they take language classes. Life is busy, so sometimes it's difficult for people to make time, to attend classes. But when we send students out, we make sure that they've taken classes, that they have, that we provide, some resources for them. And today we're working on, creating building out the curriculum, creating more asynchronous materials so people can, use them. Not only the textbook, but, here at LCRP, we are, building a library of resources, worksheets, or we call them language flyers, which I think you may have seen it, a flyer where the words are listed out, but we have a QR code for the audio, right? So how are people using that? In simple greetings, through emails, if they're employees, people on social media, they're greeting each other, during holidays or special occasions, they're using language. Some people are, being creative with it. We do our best to help people when they're wanting to translate. We get a lot of translation requests. So yeah, we do our best to be the resource. You can't only provide a dictionary to people, but you have to explain to them, how to use the language. Yeah. So.
Thank you for that. And thinking about, that kind of sets the stage to talk about what are some things that you feel like are going really well. It's hard to brag, but inviting a brag moment here of like, what are some highlights do you feel like of your time working on language? What are the things that you feel really excited that have been accomplished?
I think two things that I think of, inclusion of language, in the building here, as signage or as part of, exhibits, exhibit installations, recognition by the tribal council, or the administration to allow, time for employees to participate in cultural workshops or language, classes, language workshops. And I think, definitely with, the students, the learners that are, our regulars that come, to language class on a regular basis, and they've been coming since they were little, One of the assistant language instructors, she actually started, she must have been in middle school when she started coming to language classes when we began in 2014, and now she is a language instructor, doing it full time. So, yeah.
So like the new people that are coming up and staying with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And the enthusiasm that I guess our staff that they have for special projects that they have. Yeah.
Thinking about the work and the time and effort that you've put into your language work, what do you feel like not everything is easy, and there has to be some challenges that you faced while going through this. Thinking about those challenges, what do you think would have made things easier? Or what are some challenges that you were coming up across, and like, what did you need that you maybe didn't have when you were in your work so far?
Well, the first thought I have is, when we first started out, it took a lot of convincing even among tribal members, that a language and culture program, was important, because that means, tribal funds get taken from one place and they're allocated to another place. And of course, being a language that's being revitalized, people, it's sort of ingrained in them. They always hear, well, the language is fading, or it's dead, or the culture is fading. We have all this loss that's happening. And so, people, that they have that understanding of, themselves or their identity, I should say, that, we're lacking, as a community. But as I was saying earlier, there were, there's bits of knowledge, here and there, from families or from manuscripts or from pictures, and we have to bring all that together, and, we have to show the younger generations that, it's not that way, that we still have something. I mean, we're here, we exist as a community, so, when we're here on this land, and this land's been here, and our ancestors are here, they're buried here, so.
Just keeping that visibility.
Yeah.
Where do you find inspiration for your work?
Well, from other language workers, seeing the creativity that they have, we're all creating, something in our languages, making something our own. I think of like Catherine Brenner, recently she has the Uno. I grew up playing Uno with, my brother, my cousins, my grandparents, so, just projects like that. Yeah, those very familiar, ideas, and just making it our own, in our languages. But then also, we put so much work into what we do, so much time, and when you see the fruits of your labor, as people say, when you see young people, they're able to speak, their language, when they are able to say on their own, oh, I know what this is. This is why this is important. This is how, our people use this. So just ensuring that, young people know the traditions, the knowledge, that we're hoping, that we're hoping to carry on. So.
Language work takes a lot. It takes a lot of time, and so my next question is, what would you do if there were 3 of you? So say you have 3 clones of yourself. What would they be doing?
Wow. I have so many ideas, and I always, wish I had more hours in the day, to work on the things that I have to do, but also the things that I want to work on, the sort of like those passion projects. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of recordings of our elders that need to be digitized and transcribed. So, that I would love to, spend more time on. So.
Similarly, if you had 3 interns right now, 3 more interns, 3 more interns, what would you be having them do?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to put people to work, but Yeah, I actually I get calls from schools to, represent the tribe. So outreach within the public, within the local school systems. So I think I would like to create like a tribal ambassador program, where people from the community learn, all about, various topics of the tribe, the history, culture, language. In the local school systems, teachers will say, well, we're on the chapter, of Native Americans, and we'd like to to teach the students. We'd like someone from a tribe to visit the school. So yeah, like a tribal ambassador program where I can say, okay, we have this day, this school. Are you able to attend?
Wow. That would be really cool. That's a really great project idea. And thinking about on the other side of, thinking about the solidarity of, there's a lot of language diversity in Louisiana, and there's a lot of people working on languages in Louisiana. How can other language communities support your work?
Support our work? Mm-hmm. I guess, well, I have an example. Jonathan Mayer, I know you're familiar with Jonathan Mayer. So recently, we've done, I guess, collaboration. I can say that generally, collaboration with other language communities. For example, with Jonathan Mayer, my brother partnered with him on the, I can't pronounce the exhibit.
Mythologies.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, my brother partnered with him, and he created, John Luke, he created a illustration of Tanap and Pachafa, and I know you're familiar with Tanap and Pachafa. Yeah, it's
so for the audience that might not be familiar, can you describe what that is?
Well, okay, so Tanap, that comes from our tribe, Tunica Biloxi, and Pachafa, or Johnny Pachafa, or Johnny Pachafair, or however your family refers to him. Yes, he's a creature that lives in the woods of Avoyelles Parish, specifically. He's a half man, or he's half person, half alligator, or half person, half horse. He's half of a person. And in the story of our tribe, and this is the story that was passed down to my brother, he visits young children, and he teaches that child to fight or to wrestle, and at the end, he gives the child a choice of herbs or a knife, and that determines the child's path in life. So either be, I think a doctor or a fighter or a leader, But there are many stories of Johnny Pachafa. So going back to our collaboration with Jonathan, so John, he created an illustration of Tanap and Pachafa, and in the illustration, in the story that he wrote, Tanap and Pachafa are two different people, two different creatures, and one is representative of our Tunica lineage, and the other is representative of the Biloxi or Biloxi Choctaw lineage. And so in the story, it's sort of the two characters fight for dear women. I don't want to give away the whole story, but you can go to Capitol Park Museum, while the exhibit's open. Eventually, it may become a publication or a website, and you'll be able to read the story there. But so our collaboration, Jean-Luc wrote the story in English, and my mom and we translated it in Tunica, along with the help of Kylie, of course. And my mom, we recorded all of the translations. Jean-Luc read the English version, I read the Tunica version, and my mom, she read the French and the Kurivini version. So yeah, that's currently there at Capitol Park Museum, and you can visit there. So creativity, creating new media, I guess, continuing the story, or creating new stories based on old stories, and collaborating, with others.
Can you give a description of why that particular, or why collaboration like that is helpful to the language work that you do?
It sort of, it brings, Tunica language into another space. So, before our collaboration with Jonathan Mayer, we didn't have, a partnership with Capitol Park Museum, and that's there at the Capitol. So I guess that exhibit, it gives a space that provides a voice, gives a voice to our community, and brings awareness to what we're doing on a state level. I think, yeah.
That's cool. So thinking about that's kind of the end of the questions, but I also wanted to leave space if you feel like there's a lot of stuff we didn't cover, and if you feel like there's something on your mind right now that I didn't structurally ask you in a good way, but you still feel like it's something that you need to talk about.
Or my train of thought may have wandered and I forgot to mention other things, but well, I guess importantly, I think what I wanted to get to was with the grants that we've received.
Those are the A&A grants?
Right, A&A grants.
Okay. Were those other grants or just A&A that we're talking?
Just A&A.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was 2 3-year grants, and in total, so we've been working on this project for 6 years.
That's the Administration for Native Americans. It's a government organization out of the United States.
Right.
Just letting the camera know. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry,
so we received the Language and language preservation and maintenance grant. The first project was the creation of a mentor apprentice program. That's sort of our version of the master apprentice program. That's in other places. That I don't want to be so specific, but I know.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're familiar with language work, you would be familiar with the master apprenticeship programs that have happened at in California. I don't remember the organization.
ACLS maybe?
Yes.
Advocates for Indigenous Language of California Survival.
Right, and that was the Green Book. I'm sorry, I forget her name.
Oh, Leanne Hinton?
Right,
Okay.
Leanne Hinton, yes. So the mentor apprenticeship program, that was our version of that program. But so how it was different, of course, we're working with a revitalized language, and so we were showing the apprentices, as we called them at that time, how we go about doing everything. So they were learning Tunica at a basic level, and they went from beginner to intermediate in that project. And they were also learning about language revitalization more generally, and they were learning to teach. So it's pretty involved. We've done a lot, within those 6 years, or going to be 6 years now. But the second project, that was a continuation of the mentor apprenticeship program. And so in the beginning we had 5 apprentices, and now we have 3. They are now assistant language instructors, I should say.
So was it that you started with 5 and
Right.
3 continued, or did you have 5 in the first grant and you have 3 in the second grant?
We had 5 and then 3 continued.
Okay.
And so in the second project, they went from intermediate, learning Tunica at an intermediate level, into advanced level.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the language learner levels that I'm referring to, that's what we created based on the early versions of the textbook. Oh. So what we did was we took all the chapters, the topics that were taught in the textbook. We divided them out, into what we thought were manageable chunks. And for the most part, that's worked. And now at the advanced level, we've come to the point where, we are teaching ourselves, advanced Tunica grammar in real time. So the linguist that we're working with, Rebecca Mora, she, we have them in the advanced level. We have the topics outlined, but then, for each topic, she does further research, on whatever grammar aspect it may be. I think right now we're looking at obligative mood. It's like, things that you must do or is necessary for you to do. So she's looking at that, and in the language working group, we're deciding or I should say, together, in the language working group, these are alumni of Tulane. They look at the Tunica, the manuscripts of Haas and Albert Gachet and Swanton, and we look for examples. And I'm kind of explaining the process to you. So, based on the research of it all, we come to a consensus of what it is, or if we're on the on the right path. So yeah, we're teaching Tunica to ourselves at an advanced level, but now we're teaching community classes at beginner levels, for tribal members, I should say. Yeah.
That makes me wonder, what level do you perceive yourself at?
Yeah. I guess I don't have, we haven't tested ourselves, so, but I think, reading Tunica, reading the text, I'm able to do that now, for sure. I was speaking to someone with Wikitongues, and I told
Daniel?
him...
Daniel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Daniel.
Ordell, I think, Oregon.
Mm-hmm. And I told him, when I was a kid, I'd look at the Tunica text, and I would see all the Tunica that was there, but that was like, very foreign. I had no idea what was going on there, but I would look at the English and I would understand. But now it's no problem. I can see, the Tunica. I can break down, okay, here's this word, and this is what this means. So, yeah.
How has that changed and impacted the way that you think?
I definitely see, how things were different. Okay, well, comparing the English with the Tunica, of course, when you understand Tunica, there's more information there. In the grammar, you'll see, the verb endings. It might be, dual, but then dual feminine or dual masculine. So you can see, if there's a sentence there, you can see who's doing what, how many people were doing that action. You can see specifically, oh, that's 2 people, that's 2 women, or that's 2 men, or possibly it's a man and a woman, or more than 2, plural. So you see, the detail that's within the language, but then also on Facebook, on social media, we have tribal member forums, and sometimes people ask for translations. One translation kind of started up a whole conversation. Someone actually wanted to name a puppy Princess, and of course, Princess, that wasn't a thing, when in the 30s. I'm not sure when tribes started crowning princesses, as representation of their community. Maybe in the 50s, 40s. I think that's kind of the earliest that I've seen. So maybe that's something that someone can write on, the history of princess pageants in tribal communities. But
And this stirred up controversy on Facebook to name
yeah, so not controversy, but just a sort of a deep conversation because just this year, one of the young ladies from here, she's bringing back our tribal princess pageant. And I started going through, all the people that I remembered that were princesses, because we don't have a list, of all the women that were princesses. That I don't know, I guess no one's thought to write that down or keep a record of that. I know other places they do, but looking at Mary Haas's papers. I think when my great-grandfather, before the time that I'm sorry, I keep coughing. Before the time that our tribe received federal recognition, my great aunt Rose Pierite White and her cousin Marceline, they were crown princesses, and maybe that was by my great grandfather. I guess at that time our tribe was we were seeking recognition, so it was sort of maybe political activism. We're showing people, this is who we are. We are who we say we are.
Mm-hmm.
We are a legitimate tribal community, right? So maybe that was their reason. But as far as I know, they were the first princesses. Around that time, our tribe got involved with NCAI. Yeah.
Can you say what that means?
National Congress for American Indians. Yeah.
And that was around what years?
65, 1965. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Do you have any other stories about Rose? No, or
I probably do. Well, let's see. She had 2 sons.
Mm-hmm. Now, was she involved with language?
I'm not sure. Well, at one point, I believe she would have been. After they received the books, the Mary Haas's work, the publications from her. I'm not sure what they did, but I know that they reached out to her, and asked for copies. But she was very involved. I know she's done work in DC. I look at old newspapers, and I remember, I remember seeing pictures of, it was called the Tunica Biloxi Indian Trading Post, and that house, it was many things over time. It was a chapel or a church, a small church for the tribal community. At
This
one
was
time
in Marksville?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
in Marksville. At one time, of course, it was the trading post, and one of her uncles actually lived there. In the 60s, they opened the trading post, and many people would come, to Marksville to visit the tribe, people that they were engaging with, to do work for the tribe. Even Jeffrey Brain, visited the trading post, and of course, he's the archaeologist that was involved with the dig of the Tunica treasure. but different representatives from DC, I think HUD, even one person from HUD came here, and they would stay here, and they would do work. They would reach out to the community. So before we had our first tribal center, that was our tribal center. Yeah, but like I said, she was very involved with with doing work for the tribe. Here in Marksville, we didn't have a tribal school. Elders, they would say there was a school for, I don't mean to say it this way, but there was a school for white people, school for black people, but there wasn't a school for Indian people. So, the elders, her sisters, generation, they didn't go to school. They may have finished up to 4th grade. I think that may be something, that our community may still, feel the effects of. But of course, now we have the education program, and so, we have counselors who are advocates for students. Yeah, I came across, I say that because I came across an article where the tribe, with her help, the tribe engaged with the adult ed program, to help tribal elders learn to read. So maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say that, for all tribes in Louisiana, but, maybe that was something that kind of held back our community, So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we're really close to time. Do you have any final thoughts? Yeah.
I'm not sure unless you have another question. No.
Do you have any final shout outs of people that you work with heavily that you want to just raise their names as people that you keep language with?
I don't want to say anyone and forget someone.
Okay, yeah. I understand that.
But I mean, definitely I want to recognize my coworkers. I'm doing this interview, but this is my perspective. They have their own experiences, and I don't want to step out on that limb and kind of overshadow what they're doing, but all respects to them. So Ryan Lopez, Sydney Barbary was the instructor that I said she started when she was in middle school attending language classes. Tiana Pierite Simon, Rebecca Moore, my director John Barbary, and now our administrative coordinator Emily Barbary. So as a team, we're making this happen. We're bringing all these opportunities for learning our tribal languages and cultural traditions, traditional crafts, and so and of course everyone at Tulane, I can't leave them out. Everyone at Tulane, or who was at Tulane at one time, who got help the project get going.
Well, I think that wraps it, so thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.